Gaijin Entertainment presents The Shooting Range. You are watching The Shooting Range, a weekly show for all tankers and airmen of War Thunder. In this episode, Binoculars, a useful trick up your sleeve. The Challenge, we try to take down planes with a multiple rocket launcher system. Hotline, the developers answer questions that you left in the comments. But first, let's start with the flying cigar, the Vickers Wellington. The Wellington was 64 feet or 19.5 meters long. That's just 1.5 meters shorter than the Lancaster, and only 3 meters shorter than the mighty B-17. In other words, it was quite a big plane, with only 2 Bristol Pegasus 9-cylinder engines to carry it. And surprisingly, that was more than enough. The Wellington had a combat range of 1,550 miles, or 2,500 kilometers. And that's when it carried 2 tons of bombs. How's that even possible? Let's refresh our memories on how aircraft airframes are built. The fuselage is basically a number of bulkheads and/or formers connected to each other with stringers. And a wing is some ribs attached to the main spar. These ribs are stiffened with stringers and everything is covered with aircraft skin. Sounds easy, right? Well, probably not easy, but still rather straightforward. But the aircraft designers always have to consider the following. How many of these structural elements do you want to have in a plane? Too few and the aircraft would be very light, but not too strong. Too many, and the plane would be sturdy alright, but you risk making it too heavy to actually fly. You have to find the perfect balance every time. But what if you try a completely different approach? That's exactly what the fathers of Wellington, Barnes Wallis, and Rex Pearson did. They decided to form the whole of the fuselage with a special geodesic structural elements. In this type of construction, you use a very limited number of formers to make the shape of the aircraft, and then flat strip stringers are wound around the formers, creating a basket-like appearance. That is certainly an unconventional way to make planes, and the assembly of a proper geodesic or geodetic airframe takes a long time. But it was certainly worth it. The new aircraft turned out to be very light. Moreover, there were very few interior structural elements, which meant that there was extra room for bombs and fuel tanks, which allowed for an increased combat radius. Furthermore, the structure was exceptionally strong. Shooting at the Wellington with armor-piercing bullets was like trying to break a basket with a stick. You could hit it all day, and the basket would still be there. Even blowing one-side beams would still leave the aircraft as a whole intact, and you could repair it right in the air. No, that's not a joke. With a bit of luck, wire or at least some loose fabric from the skin, you could bind the stringers back to the frame in the middle of the flight. Where other types of aircrafts failed, Wellingtons returned home. In the late years of the Second World War, these bombers were superseded by the larger and more powerful heavies, but it was the Wellington that claimed the title of the most produced British bomber of the time. The tough flying basket served in a multitude of roles, from anti-submarine warfare and reconnaissance to passenger, mail, and freight carrying. Hardly a surprise given the fact that it was very easy to refit them. It was the middle of the 50s when the last Wellington was finally written off the inventory, and that was not the end. In a way, the bomber gave its wings to Vickers VC-1 Viking, the first pure jet transport aircraft. So yeah, that's the story of how a flying basket was able to edge into the jet age. And now, let's go back on the ground. It's time to discuss an essential military tool that is very easy to forget about. Many tankers are well aware that binoculars as a tool exist in the game, but the majority of players are still relying on the conventional tank sights. And sometimes, it is certainly the right call. For example, if you're driving an ATGM-equipped vehicle. But in some situations, binoculars are way better. See for yourselves. First, binoculars have a higher zoom and a wider field of vision. Moreover, they're not as affected by the movement of the vehicle, which means that you get a more smooth and relaxed viewing experience. What is even more important is that it works from the point of view of the commander on the top of the turret, so you can effectively peek out from behind hills, ridges, buildings, and other forms of cover. It is a great way of spotting or tracking your opponents while staying out of the harm's way. Especially useful if you are an SPG enthusiast, as these vehicles usually lack a rotating turret. And that's not all. You don't have to leave the binocular view to move your gun. Let's say you've spotted an enemy tank. Just look at the target with your binoculars and hit the fire button. Your gun will automatically move to the center of the binocular view. If the sight angle doesn't allow the gun to travel all the way, it will try to aim as close to the target as possible. In this case, you'll have to adjust the position of the vehicle. Yes, it takes some time to get used to binoculars, but trust us, it's worth it. In order to use this feature, go to Controls and assign a key to it. That's it. You're ready for some long-range action. And now for something completely different. We introduce a new section of our show, the Challenge. Life is full of important questions. Who would win in a fight between Superman and the Hulk? Is it possible to wreck a rank 4 tank with a rank 1 vehicle? Can you shoot down a jet with a biplane? That's exactly the kind of questions we're going to answer here. And today we'll try to use the respectable T-34 Calliope as an anti-aircraft gun. Can we actually hit a plane with this thing? Let's see. Just imagine, we've run out of ammunition for our main M3 gun. And then there's the menacing Petlikov PE-8 that apparently wants to return us to the hangar. Machine guns are useless, so the rockets are our only hope. The bomber is getting closer. We do our best to land a shot. Our best, I said. And here you go, we hit the wing. The 11 times the charm, or so we heard. The next target is a bit more agile, Polikarpov I-15, a single-seat biplane fighter. It can't really hurt us, but look at the way it mocks us from the safety of the skies. The biplane gets out of the harm's way time and time again. Even to get it into our sights is no trivial task. We'll have to use the landscape to our advantage. And as you see, that's not a very big advantage, but the pilot gets too cocky and too low. Fire! And it's done! Our last opponent, MiG-17. Yeah, we're hunting jets now. Well, we would hunt it if we could actually lock on it, even for a second. It's too damn fast. But the fighter loses some speed, and that's all we need. The MiG gets a rocket to the cockpit. Express delivery. The challenge is complete. Well, that wasn't easy. Just look at this. By the way, you can suggest your own ideas for this segment in the comments below. Maybe next time we'll try to do your thing. Feel free to make it crazy. Finally, it's time for another part of the show that we create together with our viewers. Hotline, developers answering questions from the comments. Strictly speaking, it's not the most serious-minded section of the show. If you want answers to be given with solemn faces, feel free to appeal to the official forums. Here we have a more lighthearted discussion of the big questions of War Thunder. We'll hope you like it. Jonathan Leprade writes, will Britain get a non-premium ATGM? We think that it will be very interesting to see non-premium ATGM equipped vehicles. So yeah, it is in the works. Another one from Grand Nyland. Why do some tanks have machine guns that don't fire? Are bad. But we're working on it. Sooner or later, all machine guns that you see in the game will be operational. A guy called DagZ63 asks, will there be an option to choose World War II play only? Actually, there is such an option. We constantly organize events that do exactly that. Check them out. There's a question from Sog Bioshock. When do you plan to implement the later model Corsairs? Sorry, but we do not plan to implement them, at least for some time. Finally, a question from Der Lutz. When will you add the P-47 Razorback, one of the most iconic aircraft in World War II, is still missing? Sorry pal, we can't tell you the exact date, but we certainly will introduce this aircraft to the game. Please, be patient. This is it for today, but feel free to write your questions in the comments below. We do read them all, and you might see some of them answered in the next episode. See you on the shooting range.